Aunt Camille, we need to go. Now. My 5-year-old nephew Timothy's urgent whisper cut through the cheerful wedding reception chatter around us. His small hand gripped mine with surprising strength as he stared at the floor beneath our table. My name is Camille Watson, and I'm 35 years old, working as a pediatric nurse in Portland, Oregon. I was sitting at my sister Brittany's wedding reception, watching her dance with her new husband Jake, when Timothy's words sent a chill down my spine. The elegant venue was filled with laughter and celebration, but something in my nephew's voice made my heart race. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked quietly, leaning down to his level. Timothy was Brittany's son from her previous relationship, a bright kid who rarely showed fear, but now his brown eyes were wide with something that looked like recognition mixed with terror. "Look under the table," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the music. "Please, Aunt Camille, we need to leave." I glanced around the reception hall, taking in the beautiful decorations and smiling guests. Brittany had spared no expense for this wedding. The crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in ivory linens, and the scent of white roses filled the air. Everything looked perfect, just as Brittany had always demanded perfection in everything she did. Growing up, Brittany had been the golden child in our family. 3 years younger than me, she was the one who got straight A's, won beauty pageants, and could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. While I worked double shifts to pay for nursing school, Brittany floated through life expecting everything to be handed to her. Even now, at 28, she seemed to believe the world owed her happiness. But lately, something had been different about my sister. Over the past few months, I'd noticed changes in her behavior that worried me. She'd become erratic, sometimes manic with energy, other times crashing into deep moods that kept her in bed for days. When I asked about it, she brushed off my concerns with that dismissive laugh she'd perfected as a teenager. "Camille, you worry too much," she'd say. "I'm just stressed about the wedding." Timothy tugged at my hand again, more insistently this time. "Please, Aunt Camille. I learned about this stuff at school. The police officers told us what to do if we see it." My stomach dropped. Slowly, trying not to draw attention from the other guests at our table, I bent down and lifted the edge of the white tablecloth. What I saw made my blood run cold and confirmed my worst fears about what had been happening to my sister. Under the table, partially hidden behind Timothy's small legs, was a collection of items that had no business being at a wedding reception. Small plastic bags with white residue, a rolled-up $20 bill, and what looked like a tiny mirror with powder traces on its surface. My hands shook as I quickly dropped the tablecloth back into place. Timothy's innocent face looked up at me with the kind of wisdom no 5-year-old should possess. "Officer Johnson showed us pictures of that stuff at school. He said if we ever see it, we should tell a grown-up we trust right away." My heart broke for this little boy who had somehow been exposed to this dangerous world. I thought about all the times Brittany had seemed distracted when I picked up Timothy for our weekend visits, how she'd rush me out of her apartment without letting me inside. The missed family dinners, the sudden mood changes, the way she'd seemed almost manic during wedding planning while spending money she claimed she didn't have. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart," I whispered, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We're going to handle this right now." I looked across the reception hall at Brittany, who was now laughing loudly at something Jake had whispered in her ear. Her movements seemed too animated, her eyes too bright. Jake's hand rested possessively on her lower back, and I noticed how he kept glancing toward our table with an expression I couldn't quite read. Our parents, Douglas and Margaret Watson, sat at the head table beaming with pride at their youngest daughter's perfect wedding. Dad had walked Brittany down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and Mom had spent the entire ceremony dabbing at her makeup with a tissue. They had no idea what was happening right under their noses. I thought about the past year of wedding preparations, how Brittany had insisted on having the most expensive venue in the city, the designer dress that cost more than I made in 2 months, the elaborate honeymoon to Europe that she claimed Jake's family was paying for. Now I wondered where the money had really come from, and what else had been going on behind the scenes of this fairy tale wedding. Timothy squeezed my hand again. "Are we going to be okay, Aunt Camille?" "Yes, baby," I said firmly, though my mind was racing with the implications of what we'd discovered. "We're going to be more than okay. But first, I need to take some pictures of what you found, and then we're going to talk to Grandpa and Grandma." I pulled out my phone, trying to look casual as I angled it under the table. The evidence was clear and damning. Whatever Brittany had gotten herself into, it had now contaminated what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. More importantly, it was endangering Timothy, and that was something I absolutely would not tolerate. As I discreetly photographed the evidence under our table, my mind raced back through recent months, connecting dots I'd been too hopeful to see before. Brittany's dramatic weight loss that she'd attributed to wedding stress, the way she'd bounce off the walls during our phone calls and then crash into silence, the expensive purchases followed by frantic calls about money, the new crowd of friends she'd started hanging around with, including Jake, whom she'd met only 8 months ago. Jake Morrison had swept into Brittany's life like a whirlwind, promising her everything she'd ever wanted. He was charming, well-dressed, and seemed to have plenty of money despite having no clear job. When I'd asked Brittany what he did for work, she'd been vague, mentioning something about investments and business opportunities. Red flags had been waving, but Brittany was so happy, so convinced she'd found her prince charming, that I'd kept my concerns to myself. Now, staring at the drug paraphernalia scattered under the table where my 5-year-old nephew had been sitting, I realized my silence had been a mistake. This wasn't just about Brittany's choices anymore. This was about a child's safety, about a family celebration being turned into something dangerous and illegal. "Aunt Camille," Timothy whispered, "there's more over there too." He pointed toward a small clutch purse that had been carelessly dropped near the base of a nearby chair. Through its partially open zipper, I could see more small plastic bags. My stomach turned as I realized the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just someone who'd brought drugs to a wedding. This looked like active dealing or distribution happening right in the middle of the reception. I glanced around the room with new eyes, noticing things I'd missed before. Several of Jake's friends had been making frequent trips to the bathroom, staying for unusually long periods. There had been a lot of whispering and discreet handshaking that I'd initially attributed to people exchanging congratulations and contact information. Now I saw it differently. The beautiful wedding reception, with its elegant decorations and joyful atmosphere, was serving as a cover for illegal drug activity. My sister, the golden child who could do no wrong, had not only developed a drug problem, but was apparently allowing her wedding to be used as some kind of distribution point. I thought about our childhood. How Brittany had always been the one who got away with everything while I was held to impossible standards. The irony wasn't lost on me that now, when she needed accountability the most, she was still managing to hide her destructive behavior behind a facade of perfection. But this time was different. This time, there was a child involved, and that changed everything. I stood up slowly, keeping Timothy close to my side, and made my decision. The golden child's reign of consequence-free living was about to come to an end. "Timothy, I need you to come with me to find Grandpa and Grandma," I said quietly, helping him down from his chair. "And I want you to stay right next to me the whole time, okay?" He nodded solemnly, his small hand gripping mine tightly as we made our way across the reception hall. I tried to walk naturally, smiling and nodding at relatives and family friends, but my heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. As we approached the head table, I caught Dad's eye and gestured for him to step aside. Douglas Watson had been a high school principal for 30 years, and he still had the authoritative presence that could command a room full of teenagers. If anyone could handle this situation with the gravity it deserved, it was him. "Dad, I need to speak with you and Mom privately," I said, keeping my voice low but urgent. "It's about Timothy's safety." The word safety was like a magic key. Dad immediately stood up, his expression shifting from celebration to concern. Mom followed, smoothing down her lavender mother-of-the-bride dress and looking worried. "What's going on, honey?" Mom asked as we moved to a quieter corner of the venue, near the coat check area. I looked down at Timothy, who was pressed against my side. "Timothy, can you tell Grandpa and Grandma what you told me about what you found under our table?" Timothy looked up at his grandparents with serious eyes. "There are drugs under the table where we were sitting. Officer Johnson at school showed us pictures so we'd know what to look for. He said drugs are dangerous, and we should always tell a grown-up we trust if we see them." Dad's face went pale. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Camille, surely you don't think—" "I took pictures," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "Dad, look at this." I showed them the photos I'd taken of the drug paraphernalia under the table. Dad's jaw tightened as he scrolled through the images, his principal instincts kicking in. Mom looked like she might be sick. "There's more," I continued, showing them the pictures of the purse with additional bags. "Dad, I think there's active drug dealing happening at this reception. Timothy could have been exposed to dangerous substances, and there's no telling how many other people are involved." "Oh my God," Mom whispered, looking across the room at Brittany, who was now posing for photos with Jake and his groomsmen. "Our baby girl. How did this happen?" Dad was already in crisis management mode. "We need to get Timothy out of here immediately," he said. "Margaret, take him to the car. Camille, I need you to stay with me. We're going to confront Brittany right now before this gets any worse." "Wait," I said, grabbing his arm. "Dad, if we confront her in front of everyone, we could be putting ourselves and the other guests in danger. We don't know how Jake's friends will react if they think they're about to be exposed." Dad nodded grimly. "You're right. But we can't just let this continue. There are children here, elderly relatives. If someone gets hurt because we didn't act..." I watched as Jake leaned over to whisper something in Brittany's ear, his hand resting on her lower back in what I now realized was a controlling gesture rather than an affectionate one. She laughed too loudly at whatever he'd said, her movements still too animated, her pupils dilated even in the bright reception lighting. "I have an idea," I said slowly. "What if we approach Brittany privately, tell her we know what's going on, and give her a chance to end this quietly? If she refuses, then we take more drastic action." Dad considered this, his eyes never leaving his youngest daughter across the room. "And if she's too far gone to listen to reason?" "Then we call the police," I said firmly. "Dad, I won't let Timothy or anyone else get hurt because we were too afraid to do the right thing. We decided that I would approach Brittany alone first, under the pretense of wanting to chat with the bride. Dad would position himself near the exit with Mom and Timothy, ready to call for help if needed. The plan felt fragile, but it was better than creating a scene that could endanger everyone at the reception. I walked across the dance floor, weaving between couples swaying to the soft jazz music. Brittany saw me coming and broke away from Jake with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Camille!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me in an embrace that felt desperate rather than affectionate. "Isn't this perfect? Isn't everything just perfect?" Up close, I could see the telltale signs I'd been missing. The slight tremor in her hands, the way she kept touching her nose, the rapid-fire speech pattern that I'd attributed to bridal excitement. My heart broke for the sister I'd grown up with, the girl who'd once braided my hair and shared her Halloween candy with me. "Brittany, I need to talk to you about something important," I said gently. "Can we step outside for just a minute?" Her smile faltered. "What about? I'm kind of busy being the bride right now, you know." Jake appeared at her side before I could respond, his arm sliding around her waist possessively. "Everything okay here, ladies?" There was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. The charming facade was still in place, but underneath I sensed something harder, more calculating. This wasn't just a man who used drugs. This was someone who controlled and manipulated others. "I just wanted to congratulate Brittany on her beautiful wedding," I said evenly, meeting his gaze. and maybe discuss some family matters. Family matters can wait until after the honeymoon, Jake said smoothly. Tonight's about celebrating, right, babe? Brittany nodded eagerly, but I caught the flicker of anxiety in her eyes. Jake's right. Whatever it is, we can talk about it later, Camille. Can't you just enjoy the party? I realized that approaching her gently wasn't going to work. Brittany was too far under Jake's influence, too deep in whatever world they'd created together. I needed to be direct, even if it meant taking a risk. I found the drugs under our table, Brittany, I said quietly but clearly. Timothy found them first. A 5-year-old child was sitting inches away from cocaine and drug paraphernalia. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Brittany's face went white, and she stumbled backward into Jake. He caught her, but his expression had turned cold and dangerous. I don't know what you're talking about, Brittany said weakly, but her voice shook. Yes, you do, I continued. And so does Jake. The question is, are you going to end this right now and get the help you need? Or am I going to have to call the police to protect Timothy and everyone else here? Jake stepped forward, his voice low and threatening. You need to be very careful about the accusations you're making, Camille. This is a private family celebration, and you wouldn't want to ruin your sister's special day over some misunderstanding, would you? But I was done being intimidated. The only thing ruining this day is the fact that you've turned my sister's wedding into a drug den. Timothy is 5 years old, Jake. 5. And he was sitting next to your stash. Brittany began to cry, her carefully applied makeup starting to run. Camille, please. You don't understand. It's not what it looks like. Then explain it to me, I said firmly. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're both high at your own wedding, and you've put every person in this room at risk. Jake's mask finally slipped completely. You know what, Camille? You always were the uptight sister. Maybe if you minded your own business, everyone would be happier. My nephew's safety is my business, I shot back. And when you bring drugs around children, you make it everyone's business. Brittany was sobbing now, her hands shaking as she tried to wipe her face. I never meant for Timothy to see anything. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, I said, my heart breaking for her, but my resolve firm. Brittany, look at me. Really look at me. When was the last time you went a day without using? When was the last time you felt like yourself? She stared at me with haunted eyes, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of my real sister underneath the drugs and Jake's influence. I can't remember, she whispered. Jake grabbed her arm roughly. Don't listen to her, babe. She's just jealous that you found happiness and she's still alone. We talked about this. Your family doesn't understand us. The controlling behavior was right there in the open now, and I realized that Brittany wasn't just struggling with addiction. She was being manipulated by someone who was using her vulnerabilities against her. Brittany, I said urgently, I love you. I've always loved you, even when it felt like Mom and Dad preferred you. But this isn't love. This isn't happiness. Look around you. Your son found drugs at your wedding. Your wedding, Brittany. She looked across the reception hall, and I could see her beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. Other guests were starting to notice our intense conversation, and several of Jake's friends were watching us with obvious concern. I want to get clean, she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. I've wanted to stop for months, but Jake says... Jake doesn't get a vote in your recovery, I interrupted. This is your choice, your life, your son's safety. Jake's face twisted with anger. That's enough. Brittany, we're leaving, now. But Brittany shook her head, pulling away from him for the first time since I'd approached them. No, I can't keep doing this. Camille's right. Timothy could have been hurt. What kind of mother am I? The kind who can choose to get help, I said firmly. Right now, tonight, We can leave together, and tomorrow we can start figuring out how to get you into treatment. Jake stepped between us again, his voice getting louder. She's not going anywhere with you. You don't know what you're messing with here, Camille. That sounded like a threat, and suddenly I was aware that several of Jake's friends were moving closer to us. The reception was still going on around us, but we were in our own bubble of tension and danger. I looked toward the exit and saw Dad watching us intently, his phone already in his hand. Mom was standing beside him with Timothy, who was safely away from whatever was about to happen. Dad caught my eye and held up his phone, making it clear he was ready to call for help at my signal. I turned back to Jake with newfound confidence. Actually, Jake, I think you're the one who doesn't know what he's messing with. You see, I'm a nurse, which means I'm a mandated reporter. And Timothy's disclosure of drug exposure means I'm legally required to report this to Child Protective Services. The color drained from both their faces as the implications sank in. Jake's face went from threatening to panicked in an instant. You can't do that. You'll ruin everything. Everything's already ruined, I said calmly, pulling out my phone. The question is whether we handle this as a family or whether I make that call to CPS right now. Brittany looked between Jake and me, her wedding dress wrinkled and her makeup streaked with tears. Camille, please, if you call them, they might take Timothy away from me. Then you need to make some very quick decisions, I replied. Are you willing to go into treatment? Are you willing to cut ties with the people who are feeding your addiction? Are you willing to put your son's safety first? Jake grabbed Brittany's arm again. Don't listen to her. She's bluffing. Your family has always been jealous of what we have. But I was done with his manipulation. I gestured to Dad, who immediately started walking toward us with determined strides. Behind him, I could see Mom leading Timothy toward the exit. Jake, let me introduce you to my father, Douglas Watson. He's been a high school principal for 30 years, which means he's dealt with more drug dealers and manipulative boyfriends than you can imagine. Dad, would you like to explain to Jake what happens when adults provide drugs at events where children are present? Dad's principal voice carried clearly across the reception area. In the state of Oregon, endangering the welfare of a child in the presence of controlled substances is a felony. Contributing to the delinquency of a minor carries additional penalties, and if any of these substances were distributed at this event, we're looking at trafficking charges. Jake's friends, who had been edging closer, suddenly found other places to be. Several of them were heading for the exits, clearly not wanting to be around when things got serious. Brittany looked at the empty space where Jake's support system had been just moments before. They're all leaving, she said in wonder. They're just leaving. Because they never cared about you, I said gently. They cared about what you could provide for them, but your family is still here. Timothy needs you to choose him. Brittany looked around the reception hall, at the beautiful decorations, the abandoned dance floor, the guests who were beginning to whisper and point. Her fairy tale wedding had become a nightmare, and reality was finally breaking through the haze of drugs and manipulation. I choose Timothy, she whispered, then louder. I choose my son. Jake's face contorted with rage. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. You think your family's going to support you through rehab? You think they're going to forgive you for this embarrassment? I'm the only one who really knows you, Brittany. I'm the only one who accepts you as you are. The way I am is sick, Brittany said, her voice growing stronger. And you made me sicker. You convinced me that using drugs was normal, that I needed them to be happy. But look where it got me. My 5-year-old son found cocaine at my wedding. Dad stepped forward, his presence commanding. Jake, I think it's time for you and your friends to leave. The reception is over. You can't kick me out of my own wedding, Jake snarled, but his bravado was cracking. Watch me, Dad replied. Security. The venue's security team, who had been discreetly alerted during our conversation, approached from multiple directions. Jake looked around wildly, realizing that his control over the situation had completely evaporated. "This isn't over," he said to Brittany. "You'll come crawling back to me within a week. You always do." But Brittany stood straighter, supported by Dad's steady presence and my unwavering gaze. "No, Jake. This is over. All of it." As security escorted Jake and his remaining friends from the venue, Brittany collapsed into Dad's arms, sobbing with a mixture of relief and devastation. The golden child had finally fallen, but she was ready to get back up with help. Jake Morrison and his associates faced immediate consequences when hotel security confiscated the remaining drugs and called Portland police. Jake was arrested on multiple charges including possession, distribution, and child endangerment, while his wedding to Brittany was legally nullified due to his criminal activity during the ceremony. His drug-dealing network collapsed when several associates were also arrested, and he faced a prison sentence that would keep him away from my sister for years. Brittany entered a court-mandated rehabilitation program within days of her wedding disaster, losing custody of Timothy temporarily, but gaining the chance to rebuild her life with proper support and counseling. As I drove home that night with Timothy safely buckled in the back seat, I reflected on how protecting a child had required me to destroy my sister's illusions about her perfect life. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's destruction, even when it means becoming the villain in their story, long enough for them to find their way back to the truth.